I would like to ask the Minister for Policy and Reform what discussions A have taken place and B are planned with the BBC regarding increasing its Isle of Man operation.
Call on the Minister for Policy and Reform, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr President, and to the member for the question. This Honourable Court approved the amended motion in a combined vote at the January sitting that, quote, the Council of Ministers should pursue negotiations with the British Broadcasting Corporation aimed at securing improved outcomes for the Isle of Man, unquote. Securing improved outcomes is different from the BBC increasing its Isle of Man operation. Statement in the question. Notice, Mr President, the Council of Ministers fully intends to fulfil the obligation placed on it by this Tynwald resolution, but no specific formal discussions have yet taken place with the BBC.
Supplementary, Mrs Caine.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank the Minister for that answer. Can I ask the Minister, does he believe the Isle of Man receives good value for money for its licence fee when compared with the BBC and Guernsey operation, for instance? And also, when does he anticipate that discussions will take place between Cabinet Office and the BBC?
Minister to reply.
I think the Council of Ministers does regard this as a very important matter, and I'm sure they will mandate with a negotiating objective the people involved in taking these negotiations forward quite soon. And also the question about the value from the TV licence fee and the question of the value of the BBC public service broadcast for us all, and also local public service broadcasting are the sort of issues that will be inside those negotiations. And at this stage, I don't want to prejudice the negotiations. There are all sorts of ways that value can be measured, and look forward to entering into those negotiations with the BBC in good faith, with the Department of Culture, Media and Sport as well, to make sure that we can secure the outcome that Tynwald Court wants us to secure.
Honourable Member for Council, Mrs Sharp.
Thank you, Mr President. I'd like to ask the Minister whether there will be an overall strategy for public service media coming before Tynwald in the future.
No, I don't want this widened into a...
Of which the BBC forms part.
We're on the BBC operation. Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. The Honourable Member of Council will remember that the clear Tynwald resolution was in two parts. The first part is that Manx Radio returns to this Honourable Court with its strategy, and the second part is the Council of Ministers in good faith secures a good outcome from the television licence fee. Personally, I'm sure at some point when we have the energy and the time, and when things have developed from both of those two motions, it would be helpful to have a public service broadcasting, indeed a broadcasting policy, strategy and action plan, and I'm sure this Honourable Court will welcome the chance to discuss that at the appropriate time.
Honourable Member Mrs Caine.
Thank you, Mr President. Just picking up on those couple of points, please, from the Minister. Can he confirm whether the Cabinet Office, along with having any discussions with the BBC and when that might happen in the near future, whether it's also planning any discussions with Manx Radio? Seeing Manx Radio was charged under that amendment to the motion to come up with its own strategy for the future by October. Is the plan that Manx Radio comes back in October with its strategy for the future, and Treasury or the funding just isn't there to support their strategy? Will the Minister be undertaking discussions with Manx Radio to involve them in the devising of any strategy for public service media on the island for the future, as well as the BBC?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. That's a very helpful question. I'm absolutely sure the Treasury, Council of Ministers will engage fully with Manx Radio as it prepares its motion for the Tynwald Court, its report for the Tynwald Court. Members in the public, I'm sure, are aware that there have been changes at the top in Manx Radio, and I think we've been waiting for the opportunity to begin that dialogue in full with the new team. The second point I wanted to make is that all sorts of people involved in broadcasting in the Isle of Man have made very helpful suggestions to me about how things should develop, and also about how negotiations across should take place. And indeed, there's a lot of scepticism about the latter point around the broadcasting community. People keep offering me bets about what can be achieved, and so on and so on. The third point to make is that is that there are already existing substantial connections between public service broadcasting at Manx Radio and with the public service broadcaster across, and that's all for the good, and that sort of connection should be encouraged, and I'm absolutely sure that the board, management and professionals who staff Manx Radio will be doing everything they can to maximise the value of those connections.
Chief Minister, Mr Quayle.
Thank you, Mr President. Would the honourable member not agree with me that whilst this topic may well be of great importance to us here, there is another topic beginning with B, which is taking the time of the Westminster Parliament, and I think there has to be a realisation, would you not agree with me, that that will have to take precedence over this B word.
Thomas.
Exactly, and Mr President, I appreciate the Chief Minister's reiteration of that point. As honourable members know, there are currently a number of pressing and priority issues arising from the UK's departure from the European, our own preparations for the constitutional implications of that, also public registers, beneficial ownership. There are only so many resources and so many people involved in, or who can be involved in all of this, and we need to get this issue in its right place in the priority list.
Honourable Member Mrs Shaw.
Thank you, Mr President. I'd like to ask the Minister whether the Council of Ministers will consider employing impartial expert media advice when drawing up any future strategy for public service media and where the BBC might fit into this. Because he mentioned that he is in negotiations with media companies on the Isle of Man, but of course, quite rightly, they all have their own interests at heart.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. That's a very helpful question. I just want to confirm we're not in any negotiations with any media outlets on the island or in any formal discussions with any broadcasting professionals, but I've tended to find that broadcast professionals have strong views and they're very, very keen to share them, and that's welcomed and that's very important. The point that the Honourable Member for Council makes is a good one, which is that Council of Ministers, through the Communications Commission, through Cabinet Office, through Treasury, will need expert advice, I'm absolutely sure. But one thing that's not been lacking in the last 40 or 50 years is independent, impartial advice about what we should be doing. And now I think we need to go right back to basics. We need to look at the Communications Act 2003 across, our Communications Bill. We need to start from that point. We need to build on it in terms of the future of the TV licence, and it's only at that stage when we've made some progress in terms of those grounds for negotiation that we can get to the technical aspects of broadcasting professionals. So everything has its time. As the Chief Minister said, the most important things these days, beginning with B, have an R after them, and then an E after it as well as an O. And before we get to broadcasting, we'll sort out beneficial ownership and some of the other major international issues. And at that time, I'm absolutely sure the focus on this will be intensive, and I also believe it will be successful.
Final supplementary, Mrs Caine.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank the Minister for his answer, but could I just question him what he feels would be the improved outcomes for the BBC service to the Isle that he would like to see, and does he anticipate securing those improved outcomes within the term of this administration?
Minister? You'll have a good go in the term of this administration, because this Council of Ministers has got a mandate from this Honourable Court to secure better outcomes, and the outcomes, as I've said, start from looking at the Communications Act 2003 across and the Communications Bill as it becomes an act in this place, and seeing whether we can go back and look at the very basics of TV licence fees. I don't want to go into the detail of that, but that's the paper. That's in the paper that's being prepared for Council of Ministers at the moment.